Okay, today's topic is sex linkage, and sex linkage is something that people rarely struggle with. So, what does sex linkage mean? These are alleles on, and it's usually, so it's the sex chromosomes. Now obviously this could be X or Y, but usually the X one. Now the reason that it's usually the X one is, of course, in our cells, if we're looking at our sex chromosomes, our X chromosome is a nice chunky one, and our Y chromosome is really quite small, and there's all this bit here that's not homologous. And that means that if genes are present up here, there isn't an equivalent on the Y chromosome. So, what does that mean? So, if we look at the genotypes, the possible genotypes, females, of course, have 2 X chromosomes, and conventionally we superscript those alleles to the chromosome to show that they're attached to the X chromosome. So if we were just looking at straightforward dominance recessiveness, a female could have 2 dominant genes and be homozygous. She could have a dominant and a recessive and be heterozygous, or she could have the 2 recessive alleles and be homozygous. Males, however, if that gene is in this non-homologous region, they've got an X and a Y chromosome, and if the allele's on the X chromosome, they can show the dominant characteristic or the recessive characteristic. So whatever's there in that non-homologous region where there's no equivalent on the Y chromosome has to be expressed. So there's only sort of 2 possible genotypes. So there are a number of sex-linked things that you can be asked about. Coat colour in cats, very famous, where the heterozygotes display a different phenotype. There are some sex-linked conditions, and the conditions that you need to know that are on your syllabus ones, are haemophilia, and Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And these are both caused by recessive alleles. On the X chromosome. Now, there are other ones, they will give you information, and the great thing about sex linkage is you are generally told that it's a sex-linked cross, or that the allele is present on the X chromosome. Of course it could be on the Y chromosome, in which case all Y chromosome ones are only expressed in males anyway. But I think that just generally you should know that colour blindness, particularly, well, in fact only, so colour blindness is also one of these, and that's red-green colour blindness. There are other types, and they are autosomal, so blue-green colour blindness, for example, is an autosomal thing on chromosome 7, I believe. But you might be asked crosses about these in particular, and you are expected to know. So haemophilia is a blood clotting disorder, where somebody who is showing this genotype or this genotype is going to have a failure of their blood to clot. It also causes sort of random internal bleeding, which is quite nasty. And Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, again expressed in this genotype or this genotype, and Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is a muscular wasting disease. So these are human conditions, and for humans you tend to, because of the number of offspring that humans have, which is very few, you tend to get the information in terms of a family tree, and they will give you a key to the symbols, but just for your sort of general information. Round circles, these are females, and these are not affected. So if we think about the genotype, they are the X big N, X big N, or X big N, X little n individuals. Now, these individuals are often called carriers because they're not displaying the trait phenotypically, but they are carrying that recessive allele. Similarly for males, males are squares, and these are not affected individuals. That means that they're that genotype. Then we've got our coloured in females, and they are affected, so they need to be homozygous recessive. And then we've got our males affected, and they're X little n Y. So what you'll often see is, at some point in a tree, you'll see the male and the female, and then their offspring being an affected male. That means that the mother has passed on this to her son, and of course the father, doesn't matter what they are really, has passed on the Y chromosome to make a boy. What you tend not to get and this is the one to watch out for, is if you get affected females, then sure, they could have inherited, just like the boy, they could have inherited that small one from their mother, but of course what all girls get from their dads is an X chromosome, so any affected female would have to get the affected one from her dad as well, which would mean he would have to be affected by the whatever it is, colour blindness. So you can only get red-green colourblind girls if the dad is colourblind and the mother is a carrier. So if you see a tree where you've got that scenario, that automatically tells you it's not sex-linked. So you do need to watch out for that, because occasionally they throw a little bit of a curveball and go, right, this is a condition, they give you a family tree, you're immediately thinking, oh yeah, I know this is sex-linked. If you've got affected females with unaffected father, then it really isn't, and it's just a normal recessive. How could you explain this? Mum must be heterozygous, dad must be heterozygous to give the homozygous recessive offspring, and that's just sort of normal Mendelian inheritance. So what I'm proposing to do now is to work through a few examples of sex linkage with family trees and some without a family tree, so that you can see how it works. I really think you need to watch those before you have a go, particularly at the homework that's got a family tree in it, so that you can see the sort of thought processes you need to go through.